There we go. Well, hello again, boys and girls. Here we are at When We Feel Like It O'Clock. And the we, this time I'm Pearl of Wisdom, as you already know. Everybody in the land does. And everybody in the land should know this fellow here by now. This is Jon from Off the Wall Hockey. He's been doing a couple videos with me now, and I think he's great. That's why I ask him all the time to come on. We did Ottawa last time, didn't we? Did Montreal, we did Colorado, and now we're gonna take a chunk out of a team that is a little tough to talk about, I suppose. The worst season in the history. Well, no, not the history, but since the Washington Capitals way back when.
Yes.
That's saying a lot. Just an absolute horrible season. We're going to talk about the Detroit Red Wings. Where do we want to start here? First of all, I guess let's get into some topical stuff. From what I understand, you're going to do a video about this, so we won't go too much into it. But it sounds like Stevie Y is going to stick with Jeff Basilli. And what are your thoughts on that, Jon?
Yeah, so the coach is coming back, and I think that's a bit of a surprise to a lot of people, given how bad this team was this year. And I have a video coming out. I just recorded today about it. That's going to come out on Saturday. But given the situation that this team is in, I completely understand why they're bringing the coach back because, no matter who is coaching this Detroit team, this team is not going to be good. Making a coaching change is not going to make the Detroit Red Wings a playoff team. And this is a group that, Blashill's been there for a while, and he got put in a very tough situation where this was a team that when Mike Babcock left was an old team who had a ton of success during, most of the 2000s and into the 2010s, but they were an aging group, based on that, Zetterberg and, Lidstrom and Datsuk core, that those guys were getting older. They were retiring. Datsuk went back to the KHL. Blashill got caught on a team that, they were going downhill no matter what. And Mike Babcock knew what he was doing when he got out of Detroit and went to Toronto. And he jumped ship from the sinking ship to the one that was bad and coming up. He knew exactly what he was doing. So I don't really blame the coach for what's happened in Detroit. I think this was a team that needed a rebuild no matter what and was going to go through this type of situation no matter what. And what people don't remember is that he was the coach in the AHL and was a very, very good coach in the AHL and was very, very good with player development in the AHL. So he's a guy that I think Stevie Y recognizes is a good player development coach. And it isn't necessarily his fault that the team is where they're at. And he's a guy that I think he wants working with the younger players and, hopefully can help these younger players as the team bottoms out. I think they've pretty much hit rock bottom at this point. And then we'll start the climb back up again as the rebuild continues through over the next few years.
Yeah. Oh, talking about that, Jon has a series of his favorite players at every position. I've been watching them. They're pretty cool. You should go check them out. It's a good conversation in the comment section too.
Always.
Yeah, I think it's been really unfair, Phil Balshilly. They have been grooming him for a long time. They spent a lot of time bringing him up and have shown belief in him. And this organization is an organization that believes in their players and their coaches, and they like to have that as their mantra or the what they're known for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it gets them in a little trouble, and I think that's part of the reason why Belshilly was put in a bad place, because you had guys on this team like Abdelkader and Nielsen and Darren Helm that loyalty is the word I'm looking for. This team has always been loyal to their player, and they are able to get free agents because of that. They won't never have any problems getting whatever free agent they want, almost within reason. But their pool of free agents that they can get is large because people look at how they treat their veterans,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to go to this team. Unfortunately, on the downside of that, you can have a problem where maybe they go a little bit over the top. And with those three contracts I was just talking about, that seems to be the case. I mean, Nielsen at 5+, Justin Abdicator for the next 4 years at 4+, and Darren Helm. Fortunately, it's almost over for this one at 3.8. And okay, those contracts are tough. It doesn't really matter so much for the cap here because they're on a rebuild. But where it does matter is these guys are the mentors for these young players. And especially in the case of guys like Justin Abdelkader, he had 3 assists this year in 46 games. You've got these young players that are looking at these guys going, why should I listen to you? I mean, you shouldn't even be in the league, dude. Like, really, it's awkward. That's the word I would say. There's a lot of awkward stuff happening in that locker room because of this transition. And it really showed this year. And I don't know if there's a coach out there that could have did much about it. You know, I really don't. And not to mention, you have that over your head that Yzerman basically came out and said it was a rebuild year.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't care who. You could have had Scotty Bowman coaching this Detroit team, and they were going to be a last place team this year. I mean, that roster is just not a competitive NHL roster. They're loaded with bad contracts coming from the Ken Holland era that they have to deal with. Luckily for them, a lot of those contracts are getting down to their final year, final couple years at this point. There's still some that are going to be hanging there. I mean, Abdelkader's contract is the worst one. $4.25 million. He's got 3 more years beyond this year on it. Yeah. And that has buyout written all over it, in my mind. He didn't even score a goal this year. And Justin Abdelkader was a very good, heart and soul, gritty, work your tail off kind of player. But his body has not held up. He's had injury issues, and he doesn't produce anything offensively anymore. And that contract has turned into an absolute disaster. And that one is bad. Franz Nielsen's contract is bad. He's 36 years old now. And, I mean, he was brought in from the Islanders to be a legitimate second-line center, and he does not produce at that level anywhere close to that anymore. Darren Helm is 33 now. He was always kind of one of those depth third line type players, but he's another guy who's really dropped off production wise. And, Jonathan Ericsson and Trevor Daley, now they're both 36 years old. Now their contracts are up. This was their final year. So both of them, I assume, will be gone. Jimmy Howard will be gone. He's 36. So the good news is that a lot of these contracts are ending either this year or next year, or, within a reasonable time frame, with the exception of Abdelkader's, which that, again, I think he's going to end up getting bought out. But it's going to be a process. And that's something I think Detroit fans need to realize is that Steve Yzerman knows this. He knows that they're in a rebuild. He was brought in specifically, I think, to go through a rebuild with this team. I don't think Ken Holland in the right situation, I think, is a good general manager. And we've seen, Edmonton this year had a very good year. But Ken Holland is not a GM that I would really want to go through a rebuild with. I think he's more of that GM that you're looking to go from playoff team to cup contender. I think Ken Holland can get you there, and he did that with Detroit. Detroit was a very legitimate Stanley Cup contender for most of his time there. I wouldn't want to go through a rebuild with him. Stevie Y, he's done this already. He did this with Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay was a last place team, and he turned them into a perennial playoff team and a team that, was in the conference finals in 2011, was in the Stanley Cup final in 2015, and is still one of the top teams in the league and has built long-term success with that Tampa Bay group. If there's anybody, a general manager that I want going through this with a team like Detroit, it's Steve Yzerman. I have full faith in his ability to make this team a playoff team again. It's going to be a process. This is not going to be an overnight fix. They're not going to be a playoff team next year. This is something that's going to take years of good drafting, good contracts, and building a team mostly with young players through the draft to get this team back to being the Detroit Red Wings of the 90s and 2000s that made the playoffs for 25 straight years, which is really almost unheard of. That's an incredible stretch. If they're going to get back to that level, it's going to take some time.
Yeah. And the thing about Stevie Y, by the way, Stevie Y is my favorite human being on the planet. I love Stevie Yzerman.
Very underrated player. People, he's
so
one of those superstars that's almost forgotten as how good he was as a player.
I say, and people give me shit for it all the time, but I say he was as good as Crosby, but whatever. I think he's fantastic. I love him. He's the most intelligent player, one of the most intelligent players, maybe short of Gretzky, that I ever saw. And he's just an intelligent human being, and showed it in Tampa. And the way he built that team also, what a lot of what people don't give. The thing is, people say, well, the team was soft. Okay, but he was working with what he had. He had low draft picks, and he went for skilled guys because they were available. I don't think it was because Stevie Yzerman didn't want grit on his team. He had Killorn and stuff like that, and he's at the end he started drafting that way. But one thing Stevie will always look for is character. And I don't mean necessarily character in the sense of being somebody that pounds you down to the ice, although that's part of it, but very mentally strong players. And that's what Stevie will build there in Detroit. He's going to build a mentally strong team. That's why I think he's going to go out and get some free agents this year. I know what Kenny Holland was doing. Kenny Holland's a brilliant dude as well. I'm not sure it was all him that was making this choice. I'm not sure that there wasn't an ownership involvement. That ownership never likes to rebuild, right? They were hoping that they could do something to have it be a quick rebuild so they didn't have to go through the burn it down and build it up thing. And it didn't work. And but I agree with you. If you're going to do that and you want to do it as quick as possible, you're not going to find a better mind than Stevie Yzerman to do it with, for sure. I love the guy. He's absolutely fantastic. But you were saying some of the good news about Detroit is they've drafted actually very well. With up until now, like guys like Anthony Mantha and Tyler Bertuzzi, of course Larkin, and they have some young defensemen coming up that look like they're going to be pretty solid as well. They also have Michael Rasmussen coming up, Cholowski and Moritz Seider. I hear that they're really going to give this Moritz Seider kid, and there's a good example of Stevie Yzerman-led picks. Seider was a lower pick. He kind of went off the board a little bit, not huge, but a little bit. But Stevie Yzerman doesn't follow the pattern of what most people look at when they look at players. His number one thing is character, and that kind of character is a strong mental character, because you can be physically ready and have the skills all you want, but if you don't have a strong mental character of desire, you're not going to make it. And nobody knows that more than Stevie Y, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, this team, there is no doubt that there are good things when you look at this Detroit team, especially with some of the prospects that they do have coming up. And, it's easy to hate on Detroit because they were so bad this year, and the NHL product that they're putting on the ice right now is certainly not good. But I can't say enough about Dylan Larkin. I think he should have the C on his jersey. I think he is He is the exact type of player that I want to build a franchise around. And I mean, I could talk all day about how much I love Dylan Larkin. Huge. There's your top line center. Now it's time to build around him. You've got Anthony Mantha, who can play, right wing or left wing. He plays both sides. That's, I think, a good thing to have. That's a good thing to have with a lot of these players, is because you piecing a lineup together, you're going to have to move some guys in and around here. Looking at this lineup going forward, Bertuzzi to me is a second liner. Ideally he's not a first line player. He's someone similar to a Brady Tkachuk type player in Ottawa. I want him on my second line. He brings offense. He can score 25 goals. He can give you, 40, 50 points, but he brings that attitude, and he's not afraid to get under the opponent's skin. He can drop the gloves if he need to. He brings that whole chip on his shoulder edge to the game as well. I love Tyler Bertuzzi. The big thing that Detroit wants this 1 overall pick, because they want Alexis Lafreniere, because that would drastically, if you have Dylan Larkin with Lafreniere on the left side and Anthony Mantha on the right side, that is, talk about a first line. And then that allows Bertuzzi to drop down to the second line, where I think he's better slotted. And then you can have Philip Zadina play the right side on the second line. And they need a second line center. Franz Nielsen's not going to cut it. That's a big area that they need as a second line center. But you see the building blocks in place here when you've got, Mantha on the top line. If you can get Bertuzzi down to the second line and you have Zadina on the second line as well, now you have 2 legitimate scoring lines. You start to see other guys come in, the Robbie Fabries, the Brendan Perlinis, the guys who are more of secondary scorers who can give you offense, the Dmytro Timoshovs, someone like that. They're secondary scorers. And if you are playing them a line down, on the third line rather than on the second line, you start to see the building blocks come into place. I actually really like where Detroit's forward group looks like it's going, because I haven't even talked about, guys like Rasmussen and, who haven't made it completely up yet. Joseph Veleno, they have Joe Veleno down there in the minors, who, again, he's only 20 years old right now. He's a guy that, I think could maybe be a second line center. I think more likely is probably a third line center. But again, we'll have to wait and see how his development goes. Michael Rasmussen, again, I think he probably ends up being a third liner. But you could have a pretty good third line there with Veleno and Rasmussen too. And again, secondary scoring is so important in the league nowadays. I like the forward group with this team. Defensively, I think there's some more issues defensively, but I love Filip Hronek. I think he's a top pair guy. And then you've got Cholowski and Seider, who look like they could be, Seider could be a top pair guy. Cholowski, I think, is better suited in the middle pair. But, there's young pieces in place here. It's just about building on that and continuing to bring these young guys in and shaping the future. This isn't a team that's going to win now. This is a team that needs development. But if they develop correctly and they continue to build on these building blocks that they have in place, could be very, very good a few years down the road.
Yeah, definitely on defense, it looks like they're going to have to look towards free agency to fill some holes here, get some veterans that are comfortable with the idea of being in a rebuilding team. Mm-hmm. The good thing about that is those veterans are usually looking at maybe a coaching career on the other side, which means that in their hearts, they and probably it's correct that they are good leaders and they are good teachers and stuff like that. So that's something that I think is really needed here for these young guys. Dennis Cholowski, for instance, you brought up, he looked really solid his first year.
And then took a big step back. Yes. Yeah,
he did take a big step back last year, which is not surprising for a young guy going through it, losing and losing and losing over and over again. It's hard. And Moritz Seider is there as well. And you mentioned even Hronek. who did still have a good year, it had to be tough. But I love Hronek too. I think Hronek is definitely a for sure. It's the only guy that you can really say he's a for sure 1-2.
Yes, I would completely agree with that.
On this roster. So defense is going to be something they're going to have to look at for future. Probably not going to be filled this year. If they do happen to get Lafreniere, I heard that they're very heavy after Stützle too. So, and that might have something to do with the fact that they have Moritz Seider. They're both Germans. And Stützle, to a lot of scouts, reminds people of Barzal. So that's not too shabby.
No, not at all.
Well, who knows how? I mean, you can't really say for sure, but usually this is a pretty deep draft. Anything in the top 3 is going to bring you a darn good player, more than likely. There are surprises that do happen, but there was somebody else you mentioned there that I want. Oh, they'll probably try Robbie Fabry back there in the middle again next year. He's a restricted free agent. I'm sure that they've got lots of cap space now, which is good. Give him a chance for that middle top spot. But I agree, defense is going to be the major issue. Good, hopefully for them, if they don't want to go back. I can't imagine they're going to have another season quite this bad, with these kids having another year of experience and filling up a few more roles. And like you said, some of the dead weight veterans kind of going off into the sunset, which was, I think, the biggest problem here. But Jonathan Bernier, I mean, if they can't find a replacement for him or bring him back, we could be looking at as bad of a year or maybe even worse next year.
Bernier was outstanding this year, especially given the team in front of him being as bad as they were. He put up some great numbers. He played really, really well. He's got next year on his contract. So I would assume he's going to be the starter next year. Long-term goaltending situation is something that Yzerman is going to have to figure out, because Jimmy Howard, could not even win a game this year. He's in UFA. He's 100% gone. I see no chance he comes back. So that leaves you with one goalie on your roster. It's Jonathan Bernier. I assume he's going to start at least for next season. But that, Bernier's 31 and has had an up and down career. He's always been a solid goaltender, some years better than others, but he's never been a franchise goalie. He's never been somebody that's going to start 60 games a season and be, one of the best goalies in the league. If they're going to, do a rebuild correctly, they're going to have to somehow find a long-term solution at goaltender, whether that's trading for a young goalie, whether that's through the draft. If, someone that they draft turns out to, be after a few years, a high-level goaltender, that would obviously be best. The goaltending situation is interesting, and I think that's something that they're going to have to still find a long-term solution for. But Bernier played very, very well this season. They cannot have any complaints about Jonathan Bernier, and I think he's at least earned, getting a chance to be the starting goaltender full-time next year as well.
He played so well last year, to the point where you may want to take into consideration that he was just a really late bloomer. He always had the skill. Everybody always said that. He was a top draft pick.
Yeah.
He played, LA, was it Colorado he played for a while?
Yeah, he played in Colorado. He played in Toronto. He bounced around a little bit.
Yeah, and had various levels of success. It seemed like his problem was not physical, but it was a mental issue with goaltending. That's why people say goaltenders are voodoo, because it's a tough mental position, maybe in any sport. Like, is there, besides maybe pitching, but even pitching, you don't play as much as a goaltender does. And it's like everything is on your shoulders every game. People don't realize how difficult it is to be a number one goaltender in the NHL. Mentally, it is just insane.
Yep.
And it's possible that Bernier got it figured out at 31. There has been lots of goaltenders that didn't get it figured out until 31. Rolison in Edmonton is one that comes to the top of my head.
Yeah, very late bloomer.
Very late bloomer. And if that's the case, and he shows that he was stopping pucks like nobody else out there. Seriously. I think you could make a case that he was the best goaltender in the league last year. But you can't give him the Vezina because he's on the worst team in the league.
Yeah.
So if he can show that again, maybe you want to give the guy a 3-4 year contract, and he's the answer in the long term. But then I forgot again that he had one more year. But if he's not, if Bernier can't be Bernier, they got 27 wins last year with Bernier being maybe one of the best goaltenders in the league. If he doesn't go back to that again, we might be talking about the same thing next year here, which is I find highly unlikely. I think Stevie Y is going to find some good leadership for these young guys, and that are able to play alongside of them. First of all, you got to be able to keep up with these guys a little bit, to play on the line with them, to be able to speak with them on the ice. They've got veterans there that can't even play on the same line as them, right? And I think that was the biggest problem, for sure. We mentioned Filip Zadina. There's a big bright spot there. It was a little bit of controversy, I guess, because Hughes was on the board there, and they ended up taking Zadina, and apparently they were going to take Hughes, but they didn't expect Zadina to fall to them, in which case they would have taken Hughes, which maybe might have been better.
Might have been better, but
yeah. But
Zadina's got a lot of potential.
I like him a lot, actually. You can tell that there's some maturity happening there, but I think when this clicks for this kid, they could have a 40-goal scorer here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's just to go on the point of, they have some good young building blocks in place here. It's just about building on those. And one thing you don't want to do is rush these kids and end up hurting their long-term development by rushing them to the NHL now. If you're looking at this team, they are not going to be good. There are not expectations for this team to be good right now. I think the best thing, and Steve Yzerman more than anybody understands this, is to let these kids develop. And then the long-term gains from that are going to be a lot better than the issue of just not being a good team right now.
Yeah, I'm sure Stevie Yzerman will know that. And I can't believe this, but we've almost approached 30 minutes already. That was a lot. And thank you very much. You brought a lot to this conversation, for sure. A lot of things to think about with this Detroit team. I really appreciate you doing this. When almost every time I ask, you're on it, and I just love you for that. Again, keep on watching his show there. Jon is absolutely it's fun to listen to. He's got great ideas. He does a wonderful live show. It's called Off the Wall Hockey. Check it on YouTube. We'll be doing more of these again, I'm sure, and I certainly hope so. But until then, everybody, make sure you hit the subscribe and the bell. And the conversation's getting a little better down there in the comment section. I know since I switched from my betting stuff, you're all a little confused and disarray, but it's coming back again, and we're going to enjoy that as well. But I'm going to keep this channel like this because I'm really enjoying it. So I'll see you, Jon. See everybody out there. Thanks for listening. Have a great day and lots of love to you.